Quick thing before we get started, I have a Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba video that's been popping in and out of copyright purgatory. It unfortunately probably didn't show up in your sub feed, and it's watchable at least at the time of this recording, so if you're interested in that, maybe go give it a look-see. Nobody did, because it didn't show up in people's sub feeds. I've probably said this before in different contexts. I like things that are dumb in a certain special way. Things that are over the top and revel in how silly or ridiculous they are unabashedly, maybe with a wink and a nod to let you know they know exactly what you're here for and are here to take you along for a wild, wonderful ride. It doesn't mean they can't have serious moments, of course. I've absolutely cried over JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Kamen Rider multiple times at this point. And ultra-serious plots definitely have their place in fiction. The Berserk manga is one of my favorite pieces of media, but even that has moments that acknowledge how ridiculous it can be. Carrion is a game that I had a lot of fun with. I kind of loved it, actually, but it's far from perfect, and I really just wish that it took itself a bit less seriously. Well, I mean, it does have little jokes from time to time, I guess, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I'm Kalice, and I kind of recommend Carrion. Carrion is billed as a reverse horror Metroidvania. You play as a meat tentacle beast with way too many teeth and cause absolute carnage as you tear and devour your way through a research facility. Promotional materials seem to refer to our very hungry protagonist as the Carrion Beast, so I'll probably, usually, sometimes do the same. I'm torn very much between thinking that this gluttonous buddy is adorable and disturbing, so I'll settle on both. You're basically playing as the entity from The Thing if it decided to just go full hungry hippos on people instead of primarily employing stealth. The Blob also comes to mind as you're growing the beast and spreading parts of it throughout this facility. As a fan of horror in general, I found this premise both fascinating and just really fun. The trailers had me hooked on the premise almost immediately. The Thing is one of my favorite films, and while it's obviously not a direct tie-in, the inspiration from and love for the film is readily apparent all throughout the game. Carrion truly shines in its unique aspects. There are some parts of this game that are genuinely unlike anything else I've ever played, and that's fucking awesome. Most of the time, movement feels absolutely amazing. The Carrion Beast is fast and can easily traverse pretty much any environment in any direction. When you point the left stick in a direction, tentacles reach out of the mass of meat and teeth to quickly and smoothly pull the creature to where you'd like to go. You can just as easily move vertically as you can horizontally. Even just moving through the environments made me feel powerful and put me into the headspace of this terrible creature. The right stick sends out a tentacle from the mass of horror that can grab things. Hitting the right trigger actually causes the tentacle to grab the thing. Objects can be thrown, obstacles can be destroyed, and if you let go of the right stick while holding a person, they'll be brought into the hungering maw of the Carrion Beast, which is a bloody and brutal and, I'm sure, crunchy experience. This restores health, and if you're not at maximum health, the beast will also grow. Once you've progressed enough in the game and gotten certain upgrades, reaching certain size and health thresholds will affect the beast's moveset. This affects some of the specifics of movement, the beast's hitbox, as well as what unlockable abilities you have access to at any given time. It's very on theme that the more you eat, the larger, more horrifying, and more powerful you become. Unfortunately, the third and final size tier that you unlock can be cumbersome when precise navigation is required, and that really takes away from how in control and dangerous I felt in the other size tiers. It's fucking wonderful in combat, but it's a real bummer to go from the high of slaughtering your enemies to awkwardly trying to wiggle through tight corridors. You can mitigate this a bit with some understanding of how movement seems to work in this game. You're not exactly controlling a traditional character, so naturally some non-traditional rules govern how you move. Basically, it seems that the bit of the Carrion Beast that you're directly controlling is the part closest to the direction you start to move in. So from neutral, if you move the stick left, you will assume control of the leftmost end of the beast, and continue to have control of that part if you move in any other direction, causing the beast to have wider turns and possibly run into itself if you're in a cramped space. If you release the left stick and then push it in a direction from neutral again, the bit that you're controlling will change, which eases some of the navigation navigation woes. It doesn't necessarily always help with corralling the very large version of the Carrion beast into particularly narrow areas. The knowledge definitely helped me with some rooms. If you ever need or want to move down to one of the lower tier sizes, I guess you could get our murderous buddy damaged, or there are certain bodies of like tainted water that you can drop off part of your biomass in. This lowers you by 1 tier of size, and returning to the larger size is as simple as going and eating that bit you left behind. Yeah, okay, this game's probably at least slightly more disgusting than adorable. Fine. As you progress through the game, you acquire more abilities. Most of these function in both combat and navigation, with a handful of exceptions. There's webbing that allows you to stun an enemy or pull a lever from far away, invisibility that allows you to sneak past enemies as well as avoid tripping security lasers, mind control that lets you take control of an enemy to flip switches or use their weapon on their allies if they have one, along with a couple more abilities. Some of these abilities require an energy bar to use. Generally, they drain as you use them, and you have to find an electrical box to whip a tentacle at to regain your meter. They all feel good to use, with one contextual exception. The navigation mechanic that comes with the armor ability can be very annoying to deal with. Basically, there's these mines that if you pass through them at all get stuck to the beast's body. Unless you use armor, this will always kill, and surviving it with armor always takes your entire meter. Certain obstacles require moving next to them with a mine on you to blow them up. The problem comes from how quickly these mines respawn. They come back almost immediately after exploding, which means you need to quickly move out of range once you have one attached. If you touch another one while one is already attached to you, you'll instantly explode and die, even if you have armor up. And to add even more annoyance, the 3rd tier size, which is the size that can use armor, sometimes has trouble interacting with those electrical boxes. Combine all of that with how difficult it is to navigate the big version of the beast with precision, and you can very easily find yourself dying over and over and over. Despite knowing exactly what it is you should be doing to get through a room, it's really not pleasant. The game is laid out in a somewhat strange way. It's a Metroidvania, which means that there's one large interconnected map. Kind of. After you get through the first level, you'll reach a hub area that you'll consistently return to throughout the game. Each level starts here and brings you back here after finishing it. Each individual level is an absolute blast to play through and consistently leads you naturally through the experience. There's a bit of exploring, but it's fast-paced, and the level design itself almost always makes it clear where you should be going next. It's absolutely phenomenal level design as far as I'm concerned, and progression through the levels is satisfying. Each level involves not only tracking down a new, substantial upgrade to your capabilities, but also corrupting and spreading the Carrion beast throughout the facility as you travel between areas and create save points. And along the way, new enemy types are consistently introduced that have to be dealt with in a variety of ways. Soldiers start using flamethrowers, which are difficult to avoid and mean you have to flee to water if you don't want to burn to death, or electric shields that make frontal attacks impossible. Robotic enemies can't be eaten, which means blunt force trauma needs to be employed. Also, there are fucking mechs. You know what? I'm gonna make a bold statement here that may sound ludicrous, but I will legitimately stand by and defend. Everything is better with mechs. Even if they're just there or don't necessarily make sense, they're fucking cool. Case in point, fighting mechs as a tentacled abomination of nature is fucking cool. The enemies do provide a solid challenge, but in taking full advantage of my ability set, I always felt like a legitimate threat to them, as a monster should, even when those enemies were giving me trouble. As the game progresses, the upgrades you acquire makes dealing with different enemy types much easier, to the point that some of them get entirely trivialized, which is so satisfying. Add in some light puzzle solving when navigating, as well as presenting multiple options for dealing with pretty much every combat encounter in the game, to that already amazing pacing, weaving all of these elements naturally together, and you have a recipe for success. It's awesome, it's fun, it's satisfying. That flow is what makes me like the game so very much. But backtracking to grab the handful of optional collectibles is another story. It's easy to get lost, partly because a lot of the areas look very samey, though the botanical gardens and Leviathan base stand out as unique and interesting, partly because the flow of the level doesn't really exist once you've finished it and are meant to just explore around to find what you missed, and most importantly, because there is no map. You just have to figure out where to go by wandering around. Now, in canon, it could be hard to justify this world-threatening monstrosity looking at a map of any description, but fuck it. You eat a special person in an area, and now you have knowledge of what the level, or part of the level, looks like. I figured it out, yay me. Even if there's literally no explanation in lore, like you just pause the game and have a map, that would have been absolutely fine. It would have greatly eliminated most of the navigational problems I had with the game. The minor immersion hit is very much worth it. In this Metroidvania, backtracking to find collectibles once I got a new power-up was by far the worst part of the game, which is quite frankly a huge fucking problem. It's one of the core aspects of the genre. I got lost so many times, and by the end of the game, even the hub area is sprawling and taxing to travel around. If you're just going level to level, the game continues to have an excellent flow of quickly and naturally indicating where you should go next. But if you want to interrupt that flow to be a completionist and get your optional upgrades, it feels bad. I genuinely feel like this game is only hurt by its Metroidvania aspects. I would have had much more fun if the game stuck to its strengths and was a more linear level-to-level experience. Sure, you can put some hidden collectibles and optional upgrades throughout the levels if you want, but then I could have just experienced that excellent level design flow from beginning to end instead of consistently being incentivized to backtrack with no navigational assistance aside from my memory, which my memory is not particularly great at. Also, I'm sure I would have had an even worse time tracking down those collectibles if Lily wasn't here also playing the game on her Switch, so we could help each other with getting around the map. Thanks so very much for that, Lily.
I good at game navigation. Helps to have a map, though.
It does help to have a map. The optional collectibles themselves also just aren't great. They're all minor upgrades, many of which feel lackluster. They entail increased resistance to fire, which makes it take longer for your beast to catch on fire when exposed to flames, tiny energy extensions, which very minorly increase your energy bar, making it so your roar, something that normally shows where main story objectives and save points are, I believe, also shows where bodies you can eat are, and extra tentacles to grab stuff with. The only type of these that I was actually excited to get and use were the tentacle upgrades, and there are only 2 of them. The game only has 9 optional upgrades total, and these are the only collectibles in the whole game. Most of them have a neat little puzzle you need to solve to get them, but a few of them basically allow you to just walk in and get the upgrade, which is lame. The puzzles are solid, but it's weird that how much you need to do to get each one is so inconsistent, especially when there are so few of them. I'd also hope that each upgrade was more substantial if there are only going to be 9 total. If there were like 50 upgrades and they were all this minor, then that would be understandable, but it's hard to feel like getting anything but the tentacle upgrades was actually worthwhile. Fire resistance is nice, I guess. I never use the roar for an actual practical reason, and the energy upgrades are so minor that only after getting all of them does it become a noticeable increase in your capabilities, like a bit. If there's only going to be 9 of them, all of them should be fairly substantial so they actually seem worth collecting. After finishing a level, there's a screen near the exit indicating if you're still missing an optional upgrade, which is nice, but that still entails traveling all around the substantial hub area simply to find out which level you need to enter to search for the upgrade. It's not a fulfilling nor rewarding process, and it dragged the whole experience down pretty substantially for me.
Also, there's nothing indicating how many of them you have gotten, except for when you get one.
Mm-hmm. And if you're on a system that has achievements, whether or not you have the achievement, assuming you haven't played the game before.
Yeah. Like, you just gotta remember, I have 4, I have 4, I have 4. Because we forgot about the one in the uranium.
Yeah, no, we totally almost missed one. Yeah. And I'm sure we would have looped back to get it eventually, but like... This Metroidvania not being fun to explore or backtrack in makes it hard to recommend this game outright. When I was progressing through the levels, I was having a gloriously violent and unique experience, but anything outside of that core experience was mediocre at best. The story of the game is fairly bare bones. You kind of know what the deal is on the most basic of levels. You're a monster, you want to eat people and grow, possibly eventually eating literally all of the people. There's little thematic ties to the Blob and the Thing, and I'm sure other horror movies, but past that you get very little direct narrative. There are some flashback sequences where you play as a scientist who discovered the Carrion beast. You can stop and examine the environment in these. These bits aren't as smooth and well-paced as the main parts of the game. I definitely had a couple of moments where I wasn't sure exactly what I should be interacting with to progress, but there is eventually a really cool, if simple, payoff for them, so I'm glad that they're here. But there's not really much of a substantial narrative, even with those flashbacks. It's basic, which is fine, but this is where my complaint from the start of the video comes from. Carrion, aside from some jokes on signs in the background and references and achievements, takes itself very seriously all throughout, which struck me as kind of strange, especially having seen how goofy and fun the promotional stuff with Devolver was. Controlling the monster kind of takes the horror out of the experience for me. Sure, there were disturbing moments, but I wasn't ever really scared while I was playing, and without a more prevalent narrative, the overly serious tone of the story fell completely flat for me. The soundtrack is excellent horror music, but I felt more like I was playing an action game, and I would have liked music that felt more fitting to that. Maybe something chiptune-y to go along with the excellently crafted pixel art visuals. Seriously, the Carrion Beast is absolutely amazing to see in motion, and those standout levels of the Botanical Gardens and Leviathan Base look legitimately great. The flamethrowers were also very striking visually. Like, I was more likely to laugh than scream while playing this game. Playing as a mass of tentacles and teeth and mouths that eats people is just an inherently goofy concept to me, and I wish they had leaned into that at least a little bit. Instead, the horror aspect is played very straight, and while there are some very cool individual moments, it just didn't wind up feeling like a cohesive experience on that front to me. And it is absolutely possible to be both goofy and legitimately scary. I think Little Shop of Horrors does that excellently. And with a more prominent story, maybe cutting to some dialogue of higher-ups at the facility trying to stop, slow down, kill, or otherwise contain this seemingly unstoppable nightmare, or if we somehow got the backgrounds of some of the people we were devouring as the Carrion Beast, the tone could have felt more fitting to me. But instead, the game comes off as over-the-top, senseless, and very, very fun slaughter, while the plot tries to be somber, haunting, and subtle. It's a weird disconnect. No spoilers, I liked the ending of the game as an individual moment because I like the thing. Not because anything in this game made that feel like a fitting conclusion to the experience. I would have preferred it if it were something on a bit of a grander scale, like, say, for example, a credits/epilogue sequence where the Carrion Beast has reached kaiju scale and is just fucking tearing skyscrapers down with its tentacles, going full Biollante on the city. Bonus points if it was playable. That may be my personal sensibility showing through, which, hey, it's my video. Of course they are. Even with all of my complaints, Carrion was a game that I had a lot of fun with. The parts I enjoyed a lot, and I'm very glad that I took the time to go through this game. Whether or not you'll enjoy it really does come down to a simple question. Do you think you'd have fun slaughtering people as this horrific, some might say adorable, meat tentacle beast? If so, this game provides a unique and often incredibly enjoyable experience that you'd probably enjoy and can't really get anywhere else. But it's bogged down by enough issues that I wouldn't blame anyone who said they couldn't enjoy the experience, and I wouldn't feel comfortable giving a caveat-free recommendation. A sequel could absolutely correct most, if not all, of the issues I had with this game, so tentacles crossed for that. This has been Kalice, thanks for watching. You can like the video, subscribe, or share this video around if you enjoyed it and want to. My Patreon exists if you'd like to support me. There's neat bonuses like access to my Discord server and raw recording sessions, so feel free to go look at that. Speaking of, big thanks to all of my current patrons like Taya, Edith, Lily, and Sam, all of whom are really cool people. And that's a different Lily from the one featured in this video, FYI. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else. Not to out myself as a certain era of Call of Duty fangirl, but I've absolutely had Carrion and all of the other Zombies Easter egg songs stuck in my head for like 2 weeks now, because word association with this game, then I dove down a music hole. Those songs were and are awesome, and I'm pretty sure I still have a voice crush on Alina Sigmund.